Good morning, everyone. Dan Bates, President and CEO, Greater Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, and we are thrilled that you could join us today. The topic today is creating intender channels. We are thrilled to have Colin Jeffries and Eric Reed with us. Colin, which I've known for a number of years, so we're thrilled to have him here. Eric, who I just recently met. So I'm sure we're in for a really informative and exciting discussion.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tiffany and Laura, everybody at the Greater Hamilton Chamber for letting us do Coffee and Conversations this morning. We're really excited to dive in on a topic that we think will be really valuable for you, and we're looking forward to getting started. So a little background on myself and Eric. I met Dan a number of years ago through a chamber, which is pretty exciting. So big believer in local chambers of commerce. Eric and I have known each other for a number of years as well, and it's kind of funny. We would get together. We would do breakfast meetings, or we'd do lunch meetings. We'd have phone calls, and probably close to a year ago, we started realizing, man, like every time I talk to Eric, I feel like I get something out of it, and every time, he would tell me that whenever he talked to me, he felt like he got something out of it too. So we thought, it would be really cool if we could start a podcast where we sort of busted through the myths, the misconceptions, and the lies of marketing and sales, and we really helped people who were looking to educate themselves or educate their business associates on marketing, sales, digital marketing, marketing strategy, advertising, branding, like all of these different things that coalesce within marketing and sales. We could help people educate themselves through sort of a quick hitting kind of punchy podcast. So we started one several months ago. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, iHeart, Megaphone, all the major podcast platforms. And we're just really excited to be here and hopefully do a little bit of education on intender channels. But if you have any questions related to marketing generally, marketing strategy, advertising, sales, we're happy to tackle those as well. We thought that building intender channels would be a really good way to kind of kick things off. Hopefully it's beneficial to everybody. So I'll let Eric say a few words, but again, thank you to the Greater Hamilton Chamber for hosting us this morning. Eric, if you're talking, I think you're muted. Are you?
How's that? Better?
Much better.
Oh, my best stuff already came out, so I apologize for that. But seriously, thank you. I think for having us, we're very excited. Colin, as he said, we've engaged in these conversations for a long time. But the passion for me, and I know I'm speaking for Colin, is really talking marketing, and we're not here to, just to be clear, we're not here trying to sell anything today. We're really just here, obviously, to have a conversation and see if we can help in some ways and just get some kind of thought stimulated, and particularly in these trying times that we're in right now. But creating intender channels is usually a place where we start with in conversations when we are talking with clients, or just kind of brainstorming on how do I get things going. Traffic to my website is one thing, but how do I make that and understand it being more meaningful and give me some items that might differentiate me from competition, or maybe just do things differently, a little bit more sophisticated than we're currently doing. So the idea, and I don't want this to be conversational, but I'll just throw this out. The definition, there is no real definition of an intender channel. The idea of an intender channel, can I just ask this first? When we say intender channel, does anybody know what that means in marketing, or think they're doing something like creating an intender channel, or is this all just new area? New area?
A lot of shaking heads when you say pretty new.
So an intender channel, for the purpose, I worked for a company years ago called iNet Interactive in Westchester, just off of 75, just north of the intersection 275 and 75. And we were a tech company in the data space, in the hosting space. We had 13 e-publications. And one of the things that we created there was a company called Ziff Davis that was a national, really high-tech e-publisher, and intender channels was a big push that they were pushing. And so what an intender channel is many companies rely on their local media, their major market newspapers, their small community newspapers, to advertise on their website to take advantage of their audience. They have 100,000, they have 500,000, and we sometimes don't think we have the audience on our website that would help us engage and do business and find good prospects, etc. So intender channels are really designed to build your audience on your website, but not just random audience, you know, by putting out some clickbait content to get people to your website. It's really about building intent, pushing out content that would, you know, if you're a restaurant and you only serve gluten-free food, you would want your content to focus on that, not getting wasted content, traffic coming to your site, and then build, those people have showed intent or interest in what you have, and then continue to remarket them. So if we see a funnel, which we all sure we can all visualize through our experience here, is that, you know, you put interested people into the top of the funnel and you're trying to get them out the bottom into acquisition. So an intender channel is all about that process, but spending a lot of time in the middle of that funnel, re-engaging over and over with those folks. And so it can sound kind of complicated and sophisticated on the surface, perhaps even a little confusing, because I know it very, very well. I live in that space. But as we answer some questions and maybe talk about it, I think we'll see it's a very easy process to start, whether you use a media company that you're using or whether you do it yourself.
I think one piece of clarification that I'll add in there is there's a big difference between sort of branding yourself through content and building intender channels. And so when you brand yourself through content, that can be seen as posting frequently on social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, right? Building your audience there. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there's a lot of positives that come there. When we're speaking with intender channel building, though, there are a couple of elements that are really important. And we'll sort of dive into the 5 steps of building an effective intender channel. But the first one is really identifying the audience you want to reach. And a big part of that is knowing where they are geographically, but also where they're spending their time. So for example, if you're trying to reach Gen Z, you really don't want to push a lot of content on Facebook because Gen Z is pretty absent on Facebook. Instead, what you want to do is realize, okay, I'm trying to reach suburban house moms that live within 20 miles of Hamilton, Ohio. And the way that they're spending their time is on Facebook, or they're spending their time on Instagram, or they're spending their time reading The Inquirer or reading a particular news channel or news site. That's a really great spot for you to then publish that content. Versus if you're just creating a bunch of YouTube videos and sending them out on YouTube, but you're not promoting them or sending them to anybody, it's going to be really difficult for you to actually build that engagement. So the first step of building an effective intender channel is really recognizing who your audience is and where they're spending their time. That will direct you on what content you should produce and where you should produce it.
Well, this
second thing,
Colin,
go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Throw it out there. I mean, is anybody producing their own content right now or repurposing content? Is that a part of anyone's strategy on this call? I know there's other people who will see this later, but just for the group here, is anybody actively engaged in producing or creating or repurposing content as a marketing strategy right now? Okay.
A couple of head nods.
So you might want to just chime in a little bit about how to set that up initially.
For sure. So when you're creating your content, it can be done across channels. So when you think of content, you can think of images on Instagram or Pinterest or on your website, like infographics. You can also think of video content. So that might be you holding your phone, making a video. It might also be you hiring a studio or having somebody in-house film some video content that you're using on Vimeo, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. But it really can be as simple as written copy or a particular ad that you've had success with that you repurpose into a longer blog post or something like that. So it doesn't have to be this multimedia 3D experience. It can be something as simple as, hey, we wrote a blog post and now we're promoting it a little bit to get more. We're trying to just engage with people and see how they're interacting with our content and whether or not they're really relevant to our business.
Okay.
So, Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about pushing the content out to the right people on the right channels?
Yeah, I do. And I guess I'll say this too. I know that I don't want to violate the way that the questions would potentially be asked in the coffee and conversation, but I know that for the purposes of this conversation, I mean, I would just encourage, if anybody you don't worry about interrupting myself or Colin. If there's a question that comes up, feel free just to unmute and blurt it out. because we certainly don't want to gloss over something, because we know this stuff. Sometimes we're so close to it that we might not see where a question might lie. But I guess the way to create content, when we hear about creating content, many people be like, oh, that's a big undertaking. You know, how do I create content? I'm not a writer. I don't know a freelance writer, etc. When we talk about content, it kind of gets defined as something that's bigger than sometimes we know what to deal with. But you know, I would say I'll just throw this out there, which ties to that. The easiest way to start an Intender channel, if you are thinking about, you know, this kind of makes sense, I'd like to try to control the audience coming in and define who it is. The easiest way to produce content is just a Facebook post. So if you don't have a Facebook page, and again, I don't want to be insulting because I know that Facebook has been out there for a while, but if you don't have a Facebook page, it literally takes about 15 minutes to set it up. And it's not about, well, I don't want to set up a Facebook page because I don't have hundreds of audience members and hundreds of people who like my page. That's fine, because we're going to try to build that. So most of the people who start with an Intender channel who don't want to spend thousands of dollars, that's one thing that's out there. You can spend $5,000, you can spend $50 a month. It's really, you're not on the hook for huge reaching into the pockets to build this. The easiest way to start it is if you have a Facebook page for your company, or the business that you work for, you can start to, let's say you're a, let's just say it's the chamber, and let's say that you're trying to gain new members. You could push out something on Facebook, just a quote of the day, just something that says on your Facebook page that says, you know, networking. You know, you can find many things on the internet, and Colin, you can chime on what you can use and what you can't use here in a second, but you can find many things on the internet about the value of being in a chamber. You can put your own 2 sentences together and put a little image there of the sun rising over the city of Hamilton. And it's just a post that goes out. And even if you only have 2 people who like your Facebook page, that doesn't matter. What you're going to do is boost that post through Facebook. And so for $15 to $20, that post can reach 3,000-4,000 people right in your geographic area. And Facebook allows you, when you're boosting that post, to put in the age demographics, the geo demographics, the income demographics, all that stuff. And so then over 4 or 5 days, you start to see that you've gotten 300-400 people engaging with that post. And so right there, those are people who have shown interest or intent in that what you pushed out on Facebook. Then Facebook allows you to invite them to like your page. Just, if you don't have to remember this, all these platforms are great at reminding you, hey, if you want to do this, just click this button. And so you click the button, and then 30 people like your page. And so just in that one post, you've gained 30 people to like your page. And we would call those people who have shown intent. They're interested in what you offer and what your business services are. And so now, just after that one, maybe hour of your time over 3 or 4 days, you've got a handful of people who've liked your page, and now you're building your own audience. So again, it's not overnight. It might take 4 weeks, 6 weeks to start to build it. You can mix in other tactics on Instagram and different things, or LinkedIn, if that's where you're, depending on where your clients are. But creating of the content shouldn't be the roadblock. There's very, very easy ways. And again, if you're dealing with media companies and agencies and partners, if they're not talking to you about Intender channels, you should be talking to them about it, and they'll know how to set these up. And if not, we're kind of hoping that you can kind of explain what you're trying to do, and they certainly have the wherewithal to create those.
And also too, there are a lot of things you can do in-house. So to Eric's point, if you're already working with a media partner, if you're already working with a marketing or branding agency or ad agency, they can do a lot with developing Intender channels or with helping you reach your target audience with the right content. One of the nice things though is you don't necessarily have to go through that route if you're already doing it yourself, if you have a marketing team in-house, if you have a marketing person in-house, right? Or maybe a 1099 marketer that's helping your business. So one thing that Eric mentioned is repurposing content. Now, what we're not suggesting is that you go out on Wikipedia, copy the Wikipedia page, act like it's your own content and share it, right? That's no good. But what you can do is find things that your competitors are doing, find things that other people in your industry are doing that might be geographically separate from you, So obviously we're in, Southwest Ohio. We could find things that people in California or Oregon or Florida or Nevada are doing, not copying it wholesale. Again, we don't want to steal content, but you can take, maybe they have a list of 3 things you should know about something that's relevant to your business, right? So if you're a financier, it might be about refinancing your car loan, or it might be about getting the best mortgage interest rate, or something of that nature, right? You can take the 3 things that they've posted that you should know. You can maybe take 1 or 2 of them, maybe add 1 or 2 of them, maybe make a list of 5 because you aggregate lists together, put your own spin on it. But the point is, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you write content. You can definitely borrow from other places on the internet, or if there's stuff that you've posted a year ago or 6 months ago or 3 months ago, you can borrow that content back from yourself and recycle it. The point is, you don't have to write new content every time you want to build an Intender channel. What you can do that's really beneficial, if you have several different audience demographics that you're trying to reach, this is called customer segmentation, where you say, okay, female suburban moms with puppies are this value to us, and female urban women without dogs are this value to us, and you're able to then segment your content. So you have one that's things you need to know about raising your puppy, things you need to know as your dog ages, that sort of thing, where you're actually segmenting people and then feeding different content to them as you retarget them. And just quick point of clarification too, I know we're throwing a lot of marketing jargon around, and I apologize for that, but just to clarify, does everyone know what retargeting is? Show of hands. If you're on Facebook Live, you can type in yes or no. Everyone's familiar with retargeting? Couple of head shakes. So real quick, retargeting means that somebody engages with your content. So maybe they're on Facebook engaging with your content. Maybe they're on your website. Maybe you have an advertorial that you're running through a media provider and they're clicking on that and engaging with it. Retargeting is simply taking that person's UTM code, their IP address, and retargeting them, serving ads to them as they go about on the internet. So we've all experienced this, right? We'll do a search for protein bars or something of that nature, and then you go on ESPN's website, or you go check the weather, or you go on Facebook, or you go on LinkedIn, and there's an advertisement there for protein bars. You're like, how did they know? They're retargeting. So we're suggesting that you can do that. It's relatively inexpensive from a cost per 1,000 impressions perspective, CPM, which is generally how those are sold. But it's really easy because you can build your content. You can make sure that it's served on the right platform. And then as people engage, they're self-identifying that they're interested in your content, and then you can retarget them pretty easily. So Eric, I guess I'll hand it back over to you if you want to talk about tracking and optimizing your Intender channel marketing.
So yeah, exactly. Thank you. So I think it's important you bring up retargeting. When, I know a lot of people in the digital space are probably doing, digital display banners, etc. When you hear Intender channels, it's easy to say, well, what's the difference between driving traffic to my site? I mean, if they're clicking on an ad, they must have intent to engage with my business. What we're talking about is a little bit deeper level. Once they're on your site, the content that you're sending, we know that if it's content around subject Y, that the people coming to your site are interested in subject Y, of course. But if your business is sophisticated, which most businesses are when you break it down into different segments, if you're in real estate and you have people who come, you can help people who buy investment properties. You can help people who are looking first-time home buyers. You can help people who are government loan prospects. You can help people who are, done pretty well in life and are looking at houses in the $1 million range. General content that I'm sure that we're all doing. And when we say content, let's be clear on that. Content doesn't mean a written story. Content's an ad. Content's a podcast. Content's the written word. Content is just something that gets people to engage, that they consume. And so that kind of content will get, for real estate, if you were like helping, Hamilton since 1927, that'll get people maybe to the website. But once they're there, how do we know who are the investment property people? How do we know who are the people seeking a very, expensive home, first-time home buyer, government loans, etc.? That's where the Intender channels come in. You're building a pool of audience members that okay, these folks here, I know are in this bucket, these folks are in this bucket. And the way that we do that is by understanding that the content is around a very specific topic, and those are the people that are showing intent in that. So if we brought people to the real estate website and they, by engaging in a general ad about real estate, once they're on the site where that content is, we didn't talk about that you should have a page on your site that has media on it, or just, a blog or whatever it is where your media stuff is. And then we understand the behavior of what people do on that page, what content they're clicking on, what content they're not clicking on. So, and then when Colin was talking about retargeting and using Google Analytics, we understand that these people have been identified as somebody engaging in specific content. So over time, we build a channel of first-time home buyers. We build a channel of investment property buyers. And then we remarket to those folks with content that fits what they're looking for. So it's, again, the whole idea of putting people into a funnel with general content. When we call it a funnel, I'll call it more of a cylinder, like a PVC pipe in plumbing. I use that analogy because I recently had to be under my sink playing with that. But you've got a PVC pipe, you're putting interested people in the top, and it kind of bulges in the center as you fill it. You're remarketing different types of content to those folks in the middle, and understanding, to Colin's point, the metrics of what is pushing somebody out the bottom as acquisition. And so you understand all those strategies with different creative. You'd want a different creative for each message you're putting out. It's up to the internal person or your media company to report to you every 2 weeks. I'm a big believer in holding media. I spend a lot of time in media. You need to hold your media folks accountable, not in judgment, but just in explaining what the metrics are telling you. Because if we're not learning from those metrics, then an intender channel just isn't going to work. And to be competitive in today's business, you have to know more about your audience. You can't just get them to your site. And that's what the intender channel is all about. So as we learn where acquisition is coming from, if we don't have metrics and analytics tied up to why that person, who that person is, how they came to the website, then it's wasted time. And so the metrics and analytics are so important. And again, I know we're throwing a lot out there, but these things are readily available, whether it's to a media partner or whether it's just through your Google Analytics and understanding where the people are engaging. So if you don't have the metrics and the analytics at the end of that, as Colin just mentioned, then you really don't know. You know that you made a sale, you made an acquisition, you gained a donor, whatever your business model is, but you really don't have the story of how they came. And if we don't have that story, then we don't know where their intent was in that process, and we can't capitalize on that.
Can we see by show of hands and Facebook Live, just simple yes or no, how many people are using a dynamic number insertion or dynamic number swapping, so DNI or DNS software on your website? Is anybody doing that? All right. Well, one thing that you can use to track how people are converting is called DNI or DNS. That's dynamic number insertion, DNI, or dynamic number swapping, DNS software. So things like CallRail, call tracking metrics are two pieces of software. We're not getting kickbacks from either of those, but you can look up DNI or DNS software. But basically what that does is if somebody comes in through a particular intender channel, or if they come in from Google Ads, or if they come in from Facebook ads or what have you, it will swap the phone number on your website so you know where those people are calling from. And the nice thing with marketing is if you're a small business, if you're geographically specific, you don't have to be super complicated. If you have 50 locations in 10 states, maybe you want to use DNI or DNS software to track exactly what's working, what's moving the needle. But if you are pretty geographically limited, Eric and I will talk a little bit about your universe, right? If your universe is maybe within 30 miles or 25 miles of where your business is located, you might not need some complicated DNI, DNS software. But if you do have that software, it's really neat because you can split your intender channels out. You can target those people, and then as they call, you can track that sale. You can track them through your system using phone number. Most CMS systems or CRM systems will allow you to track based on phone number. So if you do have that, that can be a great way to track it. If you don't have that, there's no need to overcomplicate things. if you're not doing Intender channel marketing right now and you roll out Intender channel marketing and you're able to hyper target, you're able to segment your audience and figure out who's the most valuable, who's the least valuable of your new acquisitions, and you're moving the needle, that can be beneficial in and of itself, right? If the only thing that you changed is your X variable, and that's adding an Intender channel strategy to your marketing, and you start to see sales go up, you start to see phone calls go up, you start to see web traffic go up, that in and of itself can be really beneficial without having to go through the complexity of adding a DNI or DNS system. So
I have a question.
yeah, absolutely.
One is simple and one not so simple. Back to kind of basics. You're talking about creating content, and we all know that puppies get a lot of hits, but we can't all put little puppies in our pictures for our content. So if you're going after specific audiences, how do you determine how to get their attention as far as is there particular approaches, particular keywords, particular how if I'm starting a content for the first time and I start down this path, what I think is important or what I think is exciting, my consumer may not. So how do I evaluate that?
Dan, that is an excellent question. So the idea with building Intender channels is for you to produce content that people who are good prospects for you would engage with. So to your point, yes, puppies get great shares, kittens get great shares, babies get great shares, but none of those help you determine how you're reaching or how you're interacting with your target audience. So let's say you're producing content for the first time. Like I said, you can go look at what competitors in other states are doing or similar businesses in other states. You can look at what your industry is doing internationally. If you're part of a trade organization, a lot of them will have social media kits or media kits or content kits where you can go on and you can look at some good content that they've produced, and you can you put your own spin on it and you can make it yourself, or you can make it your own. But Dan, to your point, let's say that you're selling health insurance. So one of the things that people who buy health insurance really want to know is, how do I get the best rate on my health insurance? Or when do I start looking for health insurance? Or I've lost health insurance and I'm on Cobra. So how do I stop paying for Cobra? So all of these sort of typical FAQs, if you will, that your target audience is asking, that they're doing Google searches for, that they're asking their friends on Facebook for, that they're, talking to their coworkers about, let's say, if you can narrow down and say, hey, this person buys my product or my service, and they always want to know how to get the best rates on health insurance, or when is the best time to refinance my car loan, or what can I find at this store, or when should I buy this, or when are these things the least expensive, or what have you, right? If you can produce content related to that, your business better probably than anyone else. And so we'll just use health insurance as an example. If you're a health insurance broker, you should be able to tell people how to get the best rates on their health insurance. And we're not saying that you necessarily have to give them your entire business model. But what you can do is write they're called listicles. It's a small article or a small list that has maybe 3 or 5 points. So you might have three ways to get the best rate on your health insurance, or 5 ways to get the best rate on your health insurance, or how to drop Cobra and save money, that sort of thing, where it's very niche content, but it's super related to your target audience. And I'll say too, Dan, to your point, it can be hard to cut through the flack, so to speak. The average American right now sees between 4,000 and 10,000 ads per day. Wrap your head around that. Between 4,000 and 10,000 ads every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's a ton of advertisements. Most of those, fortunately, are totally irrelevant to them. So if I'm in market for health insurance, or for refinancing my car loan, or for marketing services, or to join a networking group like the Chamber, and I see some piece of content that's related to me, I'm way more likely to engage with that than if I see a piece of content that is totally irrelevant to me. So great question, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Colin, I just want to answer that, Dan, just real quick, a little bit differently. Yeah. Most people fall into, and it's easy to do, of you wanting to get the kind of content that what's going to engage. This is about, if you come up with content to get 50 people to your website, but nobody engages and purchases your service, then that was cool content to get them to your site, but it didn't fulfill their expectation when they got there. So I would say stay away from trying to worry about what will people like and get there. Just put the facts of what you're trying, what is the business service you're offering. And if one person engages with that and comes to your site but becomes a client, that's good content. So it's, I just be careful to fall into overthinking too much of what the right content is, because you're going to do A/B testing. The other thing I'll say is it's not cheating. It's not unethical, but search on Google 5 things that people are asking about your business, and you'll see 3 or 4 different pieces of content that come up, and read them and say, that's something that I want to communicate, and just kind of put that bullet point in your own words and potentially push that out.
Okay, I have another question. Websites have evolved in that it used to be the place everybody went to. Now more people are, just doing Google searches and things like that, as opposed to pulling up websites. So has there been a change, or, in getting people to go from your social media to a website? Has that become more difficult to get them to go there? And are there particular strategies that can increase those numbers of the people who engage on your social media platforms to actually get them to move to the website?
Yeah,
Colin,
that's a great question, Dan.
Colin,
So
let me just, I want you to answer, because you have a great answer on this. I just want to say a clarification on that, is that if when people click on content or information, they're going to a URL. They're not making a decision to go to your web page or not. But Dan's exactly right, and I know that you have a lot on this, particularly Google My Business, etc. So sorry to jump in. I just want to say that the URL is where they're going to on content. So they want to consume that. They are not really interested if they're going to a website, to a splash page, etc.
yeah, so I'll sort of bifurcate my answer here, Dan. So part one, when we're talking about content specifically, is the goal may be to get them to your website, but it also may not be. So if you have a landing page or an advertorial or a particular piece of content that you want them to engage with, the goal is for them to engage with that content. Again, it might be on your website, it might not be. And then the secondary goal is to retarget them. So they sort of self-identify, hey, I'm interested in this industry or this information or this product or service. And then you are retargeting them. Or maybe they hit a page and you ask for their name and email address. And so then you're able to reach out to them later with promotions or just with information. So that's sort of part one of the answer is, yes, it's good to get them to go to your website if that's the goal, but if that's not the goal, make sure you're at least retargeting them and collecting that information. Now, the sort of second part of that answer is, you're correct. Websites today are not nearly as potent as websites were in, say, 2005. So 15 years ago, Google My Business didn't really exist. Google Maps was powerful, but not as powerful as it is today. YouTube was strong, but not as strong as it is today. So when we're thinking about Google's methodology now, they're really shifting away from presenting websites and more into presenting answers. So the way that I sort of visualize this is, 10 years ago, you did a Google search and Google would say, hey, here are the best websites to answer your question. Now you do a Google search. I could do a search for Sandwich Shop, Hamilton, Ohio. And Google doesn't just say, here's Panera, here's McAllister's, here's, your local Subway, right? Here are all these sandwich shops. Instead, what it does is it says, okay, here are a grouping of sandwich shops. It'll present 3 in the map pack, right? Here's a direct link to their menu. Here's a link to order online. Here's a link to place a DoorDash order. Here are their hours of operation. Here's when they're peaking in busyness. And here are reviews. I haven't even clicked on McAllister's website or Panera's website or Subway's website, and I can see all this information. So we're not opening the bag on Google My Business today. That's a very broad conversation. But to Dan's point, as you're producing content, it's crucial to be visible. So it goes back a little bit to understanding who your audience is and where they're spending their time consuming content. So Google My Business very likely is an important mix or piece of your marketing strategy, because as you're retargeting people and they do Google searches for you or for businesses like you want to make sure that you show up very strong, you have good reviews and that sort of thing. But To Dan's point, yes, it's important for you to have a strong website, but it really goes beyond your website into sort of your whole digital strategy. Did that answer your question, Dan? Perfect. Thank you. It's about 9:40, so I'll open it up to if anybody else has questions. Just quickly to reiterate, the sort of steps to success for building a good intender channel are: first, identify where your audience is spending their time and what content they're consuming, and then make sure that that's where your content is going. Second is create your content or repurpose your content. Revive old content if you have good content that people have engaged with in the past or that you just want to recycle. And then make sure that it's relevant. So it's questions that your consumers are asking, questions that your referral partners are asking, that sort of thing. So making sure that it's really beneficial and helpful to them. And then third, make sure that you're pushing it out on the right channels. Pay to promote it. It doesn't have to be $5,000 a month. It might be $5 a day. It might be $50 a month, right? You can set your budget and sort of gauge and engage with how folks are reacting to your content. And then finally, make sure you're tracking at some level. It might be what I call back of the napkin math, right? Where you're looking at it, you're going, web hits are up, phone calls are up, sales are up. That's great. Something's working. The only thing we changed was we built out an intender channel. It could be as complex as adding dynamic number insertion or dynamic number swapping software to your website so you can track where folks are coming from. But really don't overthink it. And then as you continue to track and optimize, you should be able to build out those intender channels and really grow your business. So with that, I know we have some questions I'm assuming we'll have some questions on Facebook Live. Please go ahead and punch those in. They'll be related to us. But if anybody has questions about intender channels, about marketing, branding, digital content, we're happy to tackle them in the next 10 or 15 minutes.
Hey, so can you kind of speak to how you identify who your audience is, and then specifically, how do you determine where that audience is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most businesses will have some sort of CRM database, or if you're a medical business, you might have an EMR or EHR system. So some sort of tracking mechanism for figuring out who your target audience is. Hopefully there's some sort of correlation between revenue and audience, meaning that you can parse out your demographics by zip code or sub zip code, maybe by address, maybe by age, maybe by other demographics, and you can figure out who are your highest ticket buyers and who are your lowest ticket buyers. And then you can bucket them, and you can really go after those folks who are in your highest bucket, if you will. Now, if you're a new business and you don't have a CRM, you don't have an EMR, you don't have a database, one thing that you can do is, as people start to engage with your content, or as people start to buy from you, you can figure out, okay, who's my target audience? If I'm selling pocket knives, my target audience is probably not middle-aged women, right? My target audience is probably 18 to 25-year-old boys or men or whatever, right? So when you think about your business model, just consider, okay, who actually am I trying to target? And then you can do some research. It shouldn't take you that long to figure out where they're spending their time. If you do have a robust database and you can really dig in, you can survey your customers, your patients, your prospects to figure out where they're spending their time. It's honestly pretty easy just to have conversations with them. I've done this before in my businesses. We've held focus groups, or we've actually just talked to people in the lobby or the waiting room, that sort of thing, where you're having a conversation, just engaging with them. Hey, I represent marketing for this organization. I just want to ask a couple of questions in a brief conversation, and you can engage with them pretty easily. And they'll tell you, oh yeah, I use Instagram. I don't use Reddit. I use Imager, but I'm not on Facebook. And they'll tell you where they're spending their time. And then you're able to use that information to publish your content. So does that answer your question? Excellent. Yeah. Great question though. I appreciate that. Any other questions we're happy to tackle?
I have another question. When you guys kind of formed Take 5 in a partnership or whatever, and you came up with the Rethink Marketing podcast, why? What was your intent? What made you call it Rethink Marketing Podcast? And, kind of what was the trigger that made that happen?
That's That's something that Colin and I really enjoy. I mean, this is a great question because we enjoy kind of getting the message out on what rethink marketing is. From our perspective, we both have spent a lot of years in marketing on both sides of the table. And so what we found is there's a lot of perception is reality in marketing. There's a lot of things that we're being told as business owners that, this is the way it's done. This is the way you have to do it. I challenge people to think of a quote that says imagination is more important than knowledge. So what we talk about is you can't just take on the face value what you're being told about marketing. You have to figure it out for yourself. The question that came right before yours, Dan, was a perfect example of this. How do you know who your audience is? Well, you have to think about, and you're going to put out some things that aren't going to work as well as others. And that's the metrics and the analytics. You have to understand what's getting people to engage. But when we sat around and said, we want to talk marketing, but what we want people to do is rethink everything that they've been taught or heard about digital display, about content, about compensation plans, etc. We just want people to stop, take a breath, and say, you know what? Maybe I need to look at it this way. How about if we looked at it this way? What if we looked at it this way? Because marketing changes every day, and marketing companies are out selling what they sell. They are selling their products. And so we try to get people to understand that, okay, I understand what it is that you're saying about this tactic, about this philosophy, about whatever it is about marketing, but here's what my business is, and I want to kind of understand, is this the right way to look at it for my business, or do I need to kind of challenge it and question and debunk some things that I'm being told? Doesn't mean that what we're being told in sales and marketing isn't accurate. It means we need to question it.
That's a great answer, right on, Eric. The only other thing I'll add to that, Dan, to your point, is when we came up with the Rethink Marketing podcast, our idea was how can we engage with business owners or people who do marketing who want to know more, but they don't want to look at a smokescreen all the time, right? Like, there are so many myths, there's so many misconceptions, and to be totally blunt, there are a lot of lies within marketing. I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with a marketing sales rep, and I know digital advertising way better than they do, and they're trying to sell something to me, and they don't know what, not to be rude, but most of the time they don't know what they're talking about. And so for us to create a platform where people who are in my seat, who are representing organizations as a media buyer or as the marketing director or VP of marketing, what have you, where they can go and if you check our podcast out, they're not more than 15 minutes unless we have a guest, and then we might run a little bit long. But the idea is really to be educational in a very consumable way. So if you have a question about retargeting or about sales compensation or about structuring your marketing strategy or implementing a new tactic, you have sort of a library where you can go listen to a 15-minute episode, and maybe you won't be an expert at the end of 15 minutes, but you'll at least have a much better understanding of that concept than you did walking into it. I've had a lot of conversations with marketing students or recent graduates about today's digital marketing landscape. And I can't tell you how many times they say, I didn't learn that in school, or we didn't cover that in class, or I didn't learn that in my internship, right? And it's not necessarily hands-on tactical information. A lot of it is conceptual. So they might not understand building intender channels. They might not understand where retargeting fits into your marketing mix. They might not know the difference between a marketing strategy and a marketing tactic. And so we just want to create a library where people can go and frankly find education and have great learning on marketing and sales related materials. But Eric's exactly on point. There's a lot of things within marketing and sales that need to be rethought. So appreciate the question.
Can I
I think we have a few more minutes if anybody else has questions we're happy to tackle.
Let me just throw this tip out to the group because
Yeah.
Hamilton, if you need, we talk about education and explaining things. Honestly, this is no joke. There's a lot of students in your vicinity who involved with pharma school business, et cetera, different universities and colleges. They do work for very little money. I don't mean exploit them, but I mean, these are college students who know an awful lot, honestly, about Instagram and about things that, that's the world they live in. So don't be afraid to reach out to Pharma School of Business and just say, hey, do you have any students who'd be interested in just answering some questions. They line up to do it, and you'll get some great advice about setting up some of your social strategies. They really understand how things, they're teaching it, they're living it. So just a great resource very close to you that you could take advantage of if you had some questions that you just wanted to understand how the social world is kind of moving and connecting with people right now. Sorry.
Excellent. Well, if we don't have any other questions, anything coming in from Facebook Live, I think we can wrap things up. But we really appreciate the opportunity again, Dan and the whole Hamilton Chamber team. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Tiffany, you want to wrap us up today?